Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar entitled Online Privacy in the Technocreep Age. My name is Anju Singh and I work for the University Relations Division at the University of Calgary, and I will be your host and moderator for the webinar today. Before we introduce our two speakers here, we do have some housekeeping items that I would like to go over, and also a couple of questions for you as an audience. But first, the housekeeping items. So, we have a survey for you. Please make sure that you fill out the survey at some point in the webinar. This is a series of webinars by University of Calgary scholars, and we have two here. Information presented is a summary of the scholars' research, and many of the images that you're going to see today have been sourced from commonly publicly available sources. Please submit your questions throughout the duration of the webinar. And check out our resources that have been provided. There are links to some really interesting connected related resources that you can check out. Please do keep the conversation going at hashtag Explore UCalgary and give us your feedback through the survey, like I said before. I do have a couple of questions to get us started with the audiences. The first one is, how concerned are you about online privacy? Very concerned, somewhat concerned, not concerned at all. So as we wait for the audiences to respond, you just need to click on your choice and then press submit. So this is an interesting age that we are living in. You know, the pizza pan that we checked out on a particular website keeps following you wherever you go, no matter which website you're on. Social media and websites are tracking what you do, where you're going, profiles of you are getting built up. We are living in a surveillance economy. So this will be a really interesting topic that we will cover, and so thank you for making the time to share all the information, all the knowledge that you've gathered through your research. So let's see what our audiences are saying. Very concerned is most of our audiences seem to be very concerned and somewhat concerned. Not concerned at all. You know, I think that would be true for humanity at large today in the digital space. We do have another question, and that is related to how willing you will be to give up your personal information for something that a website offers. Are you always willing? Are you cautiously willing? Or are you not willing at all? So let's wait and see. Like before, just make a selection and press submit, and let's check what everyone's saying. So most of you are cautiously willing, and some of you are not willing at all. I will say that you did share your information when you signed up for this webinar, so thank you for doing that and overcoming your not willing at all space. But yeah, I think that would describe most of us today. So with that, I'm going to thank our audiences for giving us a sense of where they're at and introduce our speakers. So our first speaker, and also co-editor-in-chief for Information Technology and Management Journal. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Keenan to take us through technocreep, which is an interesting term and very, very relevant for our times.
I'm actually going to hand over to you so that you can bring my slides up here because I can't see them.
Okay.
And while you're doing that, I will tell you that the word technocreep is a word that I had the privilege of making up. And I was sitting, thinking about technology, thinking about being creepy, thinking about writing a book about it, and we found that word hadn't been taken. So the good news is I get to sort of define the word technocreep for you. And I think the first thing about technocreep to know is that it's about there being wheels within wheels in technology. So you go out there, let's say you want to buy your significant other a Rolex watch. And you look on eBay and you say, oh, that's a great watch, but wait a minute, it's $9,000. I don't think my significant other is going to get that for our anniversary this year. So you go to another site, you go to maybe a site like Facebook, and what happens? A watch ad comes up for that very watch. Now you know that Facebook and eBay, where you are shopping, or Amazon, are different companies. But there's an ecosystem out there that most people don't know about, that you are being sold at a real-time auction. So the fact that you were interested in that particular watch is valuable. Now, don't get too excited. It's worth a fraction of a penny. So your abilities to be marketed to online are sort of in the aggregate because they know that somebody is going to go ahead, somebody is going to buy that watch. And you only need 1 out of 10,000. It's kind of like spam or phishing. You only need a small response rate. So the first, yes,
unless it's targeted.
Yeah, now certainly is targeted phishing as well. And in a sense, we're all targeted. If you think about it, we are definitely the targets.
Or like a law firm looking for patients with a particular form of cancer for a class action lawsuit. Those can get up to $100 a pop.
We had a case in Alberta where somebody who works at a hospital was actually selling terminally ill patients' names, and luckily that person went to jail. So one point is that there are computer crimes. There are things that you can go to jail for. So in addition to there being wheels within wheels, a lot of people don't understand this stuff. A lot of people go, how do they know that information? There are unintended consequences. You give out some information. Now, we're going to treat your information, as Andrew said, carefully, but you give information to some website somewhere, you don't know where it's going to go. It might come back to haunt you. There are creepy people out there. Now, I'm here at the University of Calgary. Some may say there are creepy people here. Wherever in the world you are, there are going to be people looking after you. There's a guy in North Korea who is maybe trying to target people in North America. And the laws are lagging. We do have computer crime laws. I worked on some of the first ones in 1974. The problem is technology moves a lot faster. So take things like drones. There are reportedly people flying drones past 35th story condo windows in Vancouver, looking in and having a look at what the people are doing. Now, I've personally been pursued by a number of things online. I think it's interesting to look at the range. One is my own book, Technocreep, and Indigo Books and Music thinks I would like to buy a copy. The late lamented Sears department store chased me for a long time trying to sell me a 24-inch wall oven. And maybe that's why they're not in business, because the reality is I wasn't going to buy that oven, and they were wasting their time. The one that I want to call your attention to is Hotwire. It's a travel site, and it's trying to sell me a rental car in Vancouver, BC. Notice that it's saying which dates I plan to be in Vancouver, BC. That's part of the information that's being sold. And how do I know about this stuff? I go to hacker conferences. I go to places like DEF CON, which is held in Las Vegas. That's where there are 25,000 hackers spread out in a hotel. And they are some of the smartest people in the world. So I learned from those folks. And I'm always very careful when I'm down there. I was about to get into an elevator once, and I looked down at a laptop, and the guys at that laptop had just taken control of all the elevators in Caesar's Palace. So bringing this knowledge to the university is part of the fun of my job. This is an example from DEF CON of a woman who's a German minister, Valerie Wilms, and she actually was featured on a TV show because they invaded her privacy. And this goes to how bad can it get. They knew every single thing that Valerie Wilms typed. They noticed that she was looking for a certain drug, a psychoactive drug called Tibonin. They noticed that she was paying her taxes to Germany on the very last day that they were due. How did they get all this information? Valerie made, and she had quite a reaction to it. She said a naughty word in German. They knew because she trusted something called Web of Trust. So my first message to you is be careful who you trust, even if they're called Web of Trust. That particular browser plugin was selling the information. So they were aggregating anonymous information. Do not believe the word anonymous. There is no anonymity on the internet. You can be re-identified probably from 10 websites that you go to. In Wilm's case, she had a profile on Twitter. They were able to figure out who she was, so they knew that she was the one who was doing that. They also managed to catch a Dutch judge and find out what kind of pornography he was watching. Predictive analytics. There are people out there whose job description is predictive analytics analyst. What do these people do? They actually go out there and they try to track what you bought. The most famous example, and one that I talked about in my book, is people who bought the video game Call of Duty and people who bought adult diapers. There's a correlation. Amazon figured that out. And that kind of gives an interesting perspective on what people do when they are playing video games. And Amazon actually was embarrassed by this. So now, if you look for Amazon, they say other diapers. They show you people who bought this also bought other diapers. But be aware that your browsing history is worth something to Amazon. You are being watched. You're watched on things like meal choices on flights. Okay, short flights, of course, they don't feed us. You go to Australia, they have to feed you or you would die. And if you choose a Muslim meal, if you choose a kosher meal, if you choose a Hindu meal, that information is being sent, among other places, to the Department of Homeland Security in the U.S. So if you have nothing to hide, you may say, I'm innocent. I don't buy that argument. I think, in fact, even if you have nothing to hide, you can look bad. There was a guy I interviewed who was tracked by the FBI because he parked in parking stall number 6. What he didn't know was the guy in parking stall number 7 was a mafia don, and they would always say hello, and the FBI people wrote down known associate of mafioso. So just because you're innocent doesn't mean you're going to look innocent.
And the other aspect of this is all the data that you're giving. You're also giving these predictive analytics people the power to monetize it.
To monetize it, to sell it, to trade it. We put up so much stuff on social media. Just as one example, I was at a conference, a guy took a phone from somebody and he said, let me tell you all about yourself from where you used Wi-Fi. Okay, Royal Bank of Scotland employee site, now I know where you work. British Airlines first class lounge, oh, you're an important person at the bank. And then he paused and he said, I didn't know they had Wi-Fi at Hooters. So you are leaving digital tracks, even by where you log on to Wi-Fi. Here's the point. You can get rid of those. You can take them out of your phone. But the next time you go to the Air Canada lounge or something, you're going to have to re-authenticate yourself. So there's a trade-off going on there between the convenience that we want and the privacy that we maybe think we want. And Ray's going to have a lot to say about that, I know. I was present in the room where this guy, Beast, he goes by a nickname Beast, showed how your smart TV could be watching you. So anybody who has a pinhole camera in their TV and their laptop, do this today. Either get a cover for it, and they're readily available, or put a piece of tape over it and only take it off when you're using it. Because I guarantee you, there are bad guys out there, and Samsung was among the ones that was vulnerable, that can turn on your TV or your laptop.
What about the phones as well?
Absolutely. In my book, I have a thing called Rastreador de Namorado, which is boyfriend tracker. Girls in Brazil were installing this on their boyfriends' phones. It tracked every message. It also gave them the ability to turn on the microphone and the camera. Right. Some girls didn't like what they saw after they did that. Even the real world is going to get creepier. So we have stores with shelves, and we walk by them all the time. Well, guess what? Mondelez, the company that makes Oreo and Chips Ahoy cookies, is bringing out smart shelves. As you walk by, they will see if you're male or female, measure your body mass index, and maybe give you on your cell phone a coupon for Chips Ahoy cookies if you look like you'd be a good customer. The business point of this is that it's not totally undefensible because the store's already online. Amazon knows everything about you. This is just the real bricks and mortar store trying to catch up with the online merchants. Even certain technologies that we never could think of a use for are coming out there. There is an invention called the audio spotlight. It's about the size of this cup, and it sends sound like a laser beam. And somebody figured out that if you suspended this in the ceiling and then people stood right under it, you could play a message. And people would hear the message, hello, you can hear me, but no one else can. I'm the voice of your conscience. Do you see those bananas in front of you? They're fair trade bananas. Now, they cost more, but you know what you should do. So Ray, do you think that's ethical? That a store could do that?
Subliminal advertising has long been criticized.
Yeah, this isn't subliminal. You know it's happening, but there's no sign that says, beware. We're going to talk as the voice of your conscience.
I think that when you combine, if you go back and look at the pyramid of collection of this information from the Internet of Things, which is pervasive and everything is,
and you can't stop it.
You can't stop it, and we're all tied in with everything. To the collection in the databases, up through the big data analytics, and then into the predictive analytics. It starts to get scary. So if that person standing there, if they've already identified who exactly you are and they've tied this to your profile, and then that message is custom tailored to you, and by the way, they also know your emotional state because they tied in with Spotify, who has a large contract with an advertising
What
firm.
music you like?
And I read an article yesterday or the day before on Spotify using their data to actually detect what mood you're in.
Okay.
So what emotional state you're in. So these messages can be modified to the exact way.
If you're vulnerable, you're going to buy those cookies.
It's an interesting question. The larger question is it's called price discrimination.
Yep.
And
we're going to get to that, right? So in your slides.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll hold
Okay,
that for
sure.
a minute.
I'll just tell you, people ask me all the time, can your Amazon Echo or your Google Home listen in on you? I am a computer scientist. It has a microphone that is always on, right? The Google Home is waiting for you to say, hey, Google, or hello, Google. The Amazon is waiting for you to say, Alexa, do something. So therefore, those microphones have to listen in. The question is, what are they doing with that information? And the answer is, they say they're throwing it away. They say they only keep a snippet. Microphones have to be on to hear their wake-up word, so that's the truth. But you gotta wonder, a big company like Amazon, some people say you should trust a big company like that. I have a one-word answer for them, Volkswagen. We trusted Volkswagen. We thought they were doing emission tests. They were lying about it. So I think if the NSA or someone came to Amazon with all the right court paperwork and said, Andrew is really suspicious, we have to listen in on her Google Home. And I don't know if you have a Google Home. I think that they just might knuckle under and eavesdrop on you.
And there's the other side to this, which is, you were talking about where they determine what kind of a state you're in, and there is a relevancy factor about marketing to you in a very relevant way. If it's respectful and relevant, supposedly it's okay. But I think what we're finding is with so much data being available there, the confusion is around exactly what is it going to be used for beyond. If you know this much about me, how much more can you know?
And nobody
what
knows.
else?
I mean, we've had these cases with shopping malls in Calgary, two of them, Chinook and Cross Iron, where someone has discovered that there are cameras watching people. And the problem is nobody knows what those cameras are doing. The stores claim they're innocent. Cadillac Fairview said, oh yeah, we have this technology there, but we're not using it.
Yeah, and this was in the media. So,
but a major concern in that along that same line is the social exclusion and the potential for individuals to be unfairly excluded from what we do.
So
because you are a big user of digital stuff, they can identify you, need certain things, but I'm not a big user of digital media.
I think it's worse than that. It's so let's say that you're placing ads for a job on Facebook, and you target a particular demographic group, but that implicitly excludes perhaps people over 40. Now, you're over 40, you don't see that ad for that job.
You don't know it exists.
You don't know it exists.
Yeah.
You don't know that the special price on car insurance exists because it wasn't targeted at you. It was targeted at someone else. So the flip side to price discrimination is social exclusion.
So before we hear all the details from Ray about price discrimination, I want to just tell you what I think is the creepiest place in North America. They don't discriminate. Anybody who has enough money can go into a Disney theme park.
I love Disney.
Well, you may, but when you go there, if you get one of those My Magic Plus wristbands, they have not one, but two RFID tags in them. They know every ride you went on, every bathroom you went into, which stall you used.
But it makes life so convenient.
You know, it makes it convenient, but you're going to get a situation, even kids have credit limits on their bands, where the Minnie Mouse is there, a teenager dressed as Minnie Mouse, and she says, oh, look, here comes Sally. She's from Calgary. She's got all this information on the wristband. She has $29 left to spend today. Here's the $25.99 Minnie Mouse doll. So your kids could be targeted. I think it's extremely creepy, and even your smell, your sense of smell is being used against you at Disney parks. They have a machine called the Smellitzer that blows out scents, so the Pirates of the Caribbean smells like the sea, the haunted house smells creepy. Well, they also blow out the smell of cookies baking onto Main Street, USA. And as it turns out, they're baked in a factory 40 miles away, but you get awfully hungry. So I'm hungry to hear what you're doing. Tell us. It's your turn.
I love Disney.
We can disagree on some things, including Disney.
And we have a few members of our audience talking about their own experiences and being targeted. And there's lots of questions around, so what do we do about this? And I know we're going to be covering this later, so for our audiences, we will be touching on that.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is acknowledge all of my co-authors, Dr. Hooman Hadaji and Dr. Ram Gopal, Eric Rowland, and Dmitry Zadnov. It was a team of researchers from across North America. So we looked at the third-party connections. That is, when you go to a website, what are the actual third-party connections that are made in the first very few seconds of touching that website? And your data is shared with many, 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 many companies instantly, and they're just ubiquitous. I mean, the largest ones, of course, Facebook, Google, Oracle, Verizon, collecting data from a lot of different sources, but there are hundreds and hundreds of companies in every industry, subject category, website subject category. And but when you touch a website, you're actually not only touching that website, but you're touching the third parties that they are partnering with. They couldn't do their job on that website without the help of a lot of, essentially, it's the supply chain for the websites.
And are you talking about the trackers that they put on the site, or is there something else?
Yeah, there are three different types or main categories of third parties. One is for functionality, second is for performance, and the third is, of course, targeting and advertising. And that last area is where most of the third parties are in, but still there's a lot of engagement in the other areas, functionality and performance. So how many third parties track you? Well, this was, we just did, we went out to 23 sites, and here you see the results. This is from a plugin that we added on to Firefox that's available, and you can actually see the activity. Just with 23 sites, visiting 23 sites, we picked up 363 third-party touches. So it's pervasive.
So what does this particular graphic actually show? That there were as many touches, but what's happening in the center?
This is a visualization provided by Lightbeam, which is an add-on with Firefox, and it gives you a visualization of the concentration of touches. Basically, the take from that is, yeah, a lot of people are actually listening in the first 3 seconds when you go out and touch a website. It's not isolated. You're not just connecting with that website. You are connecting with all of the third parties that they are partnering with. And there's a lot of really good reasons to partner with a website. For example, you go to a news site and they might have the weather. They might also have a mortgage calculator, and you put in your mortgage information. And now somebody knows that you're looking for a house in a particular neighborhood because they know where you are coming from, where that IP address is. Even if it's not, maybe especially if it's not your home address, that you're in a different location looking for a house. In any event, it's being collected and being put into the big data analytics and predictive analytics machinery. So the current situation, user information is shared extensively. There's not a lot of control, at least in North America. In Canada and the U.S., it's no controls really.
Would it be fair to say, though, that Canada, in terms of regulations, is better than the United States? We do have the CASL regulation here as an example, which is the Canadian anti-spam legislation.
But that has nothing to do with this stuff.
Yeah.
Tom, what are your thoughts?
Well, we have
on that?
privacy commissioners. That's one way in which we're better. Okay, so you have Jill Clayton, great privacy commissioners in each province and a federal commissioner. So we have somebody to go to. In the US, you tend to have to go to the Federal Trade Commission or something like that. So I'm a big fan of Canada's privacy commissioner system.
But I don't think that I would contend that there really isn't any effective control on this industry. Would you agree with
Well,
that,
remember,
Tom?
we do, as of November 1st, and this is important news you can use, there's mandatory breach notification, right? So all of a sudden, if there are privacy breaches, not to be confused with what we're talking about here, which is sharing, the Privacy Commissioner has to be notified. So I think we're at the beginning of a wave. In fact, some people have predicted, Bruce Schneier, a big security expert, that the whole world that we have now, where companies make money from selling our information, is going to crumble, because sooner or later people are going to revolt, right?
Yes.
So get ready to pay $295 a year to have a Facebook page, because that's probably what it's worth. Did you ever see the values on Google, what you're worth to Google?
It's quite a bit.
It's into the thousands of dollars a year if you use all their services. So if you want to start paying for all the stuff you're getting for free, you better take out another mortgage on your house.
So this is an example of a company and some of the things that they collect on you. This is your Axiom profile. So, Tom, do you want to say anything about the many things that they collect? They're collecting everything.
You know, they have little nicknames for them too, like urban strivers and things like that. There's actually a document you can get from their website that they use to market profiling, but there are like 75 categories, and it's hard to figure out like which one are you, which one am I. But they know because they have your data. They know better than you do.
But they're not alone. Here is Oracle. It's not just Axiom.
Yeah.
Also, Oracle collecting a lot of stuff. Everything from what movies do you watch, and what your sexual orientation and gender identity is, to virtually all aspects of your.
And we have these names here, but really, it's hardly limited to some of the names that we're sharing here. Right?
It's so tempting. Every company wants to do it.
True. And here's an overall view. This slide is a little crazy, but it's an overall view of the industry. And so very nice slide provided by Christy Wolf. All three of these. Got to give a shout out to her. And
so the public sector is in there.
Yep.
Our governments are doing this.
Government surveillance.
Right.
It's a little scary. One of the aspects, I think, of privacy and security that people worry about is getting targeted by law enforcement without proper oversight, without proper search warrants. And that's playing out in the courts in North America today. So it's a fascinating time that we live in. I agree with you, though. There is no such thing as privacy anymore. There's no such thing as anonymity.
Even if you live under a rock, you have to come out to get food once in a while, and the satellite's going to see you. Right? There are satellites watching you all the time. And how good are they? Well, they can read the time on your wristwatch.
It's a little scary, and some governments are actively trying to collect data on all activities of their citizens. We've chatted about China in the past.
Yeah.
So there's a relevant question here, and this is a person saying, I'm a simple person living a rather unsophisticated life. No one will ever find anything particularly interesting about me. So why do I have to be worried about my use of technology outside of people marketing to me?
Well, if you go to the grocery store, you're being tracked. And when Safeway had the Safeway card, I called them up and I said, what do you know? And first I called Air Miles. I said, what do you know if I shop at Safeway? They say, we know you spent $32 and they give you 2 Air Miles. I said, well, that's all you know? They said, yeah, but call Safeway on their loyalty card. Find out what they know. Well, they know exactly what store you shopped in, what time you shopped in, and the name. So I used to speak to school kids, and I would go, they know you bought corn, cantaloupes, and condoms. And the kids would go, oh, I'm never going to use that card again. But it's an important idea. You had to use that card, or you were spending too much money. So even a simple person, as this person says they are, you don't want to waste money. So you're going to join loyalty programs, and therefore you're going to give out information. So you are tracked.
And their argument is that, yes, I'm okay to be tracked because I'll be given the right offers and so on and so forth. I know you're going to come to that.
Let me ask you this question. So to our viewer that asked that question, we're at the point where we're almost able to detect the emotional state that each person is in with a camera, and we can instantly detect how you're feeling, whether or not you have contempt on your face, or whether or not you, what are you thinking? And we're getting almost to the point where we can actually predict this pretty well. There is, I read a case of a school that was installing cameras all over the school so that they could monitor and track the emotional state continuously of every student. You say, but the students don't have to go there if they have a choice to go there.
No, the parents probably made the choice.
Parents probably made the choice, but someone made a choice. But the point is not that they made a choice, is that, you know, it is a little creepy, a little techno-creepy.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with Tom.
Okay.
Daycares have cameras now too. Like, you can't really run a daycare in the U.S. unless you allow the parents the ability to watch their kid at the daycare.
And, you know, sometimes it's good because I know of a case where a friend of mine watched that video and then saw abuse
Yes.
on the video, and that's a very positive outcome. So all of these things have positives, and then there's a downside. And all we're talking about today is the downside. There are lots of positives. But our research questions were a little different. We wanted to look at how websites balance that third-party usage versus the user privacy concerns. So we actually we hypothesized that the user privacy concerns were actually putting a brake on the system. That there were brakes, natural brakes on the system, and that if there were any brakes with this invisible hand in the system that was, you know, could we see them through privacy concerns? And we did. So what is the effect of privacy concerns on the third-party industry, and how are the stakeholders and social welfare affected by third-party usage, regulation, and collusion? And we also looked at what the major business models may have been, maybe used by websites in terms of subscription fees and user information monetization. We looked at 100 top websites in 7 different categories and 3 industry sectors. And we aggregated those based on the owner companies. And here's one of the results that we got. The targeting and advertising has a lot more third-party action going on than the functionality and performance. And also, you'll notice that it changes by, it goes down from news to arts to shopping to kids and teens to health to business down to adult. So there are differences in how much sharing different types of sites are willing to do, but that is being driven. So our papers showed that it was basically being driven not by their good nature of the websites, but by the fears of the customers, the concerns that the users had. And so then we looked at the industry concentration, which is, there's a measure called the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, HHI Index, that looks at whether or not you get a concentration of providers in an industry. And why that matters is that if we have a provider in an industry that's very concentrated, or if an industry is very concentrated, it means that a very few set of providers can see across the entire industry. And what we saw is that as privacy concerns got lower, the industry concentrations actually went up. So although the amount of usage of third parties went down, they could see across your activity within that industry, across different websites more readily. So that's kind of important. There was no rhyme or reason with respect to the website popularity. We have a very flat line. It doesn't really matter. It's not indicated by popularity. That's not what's driving this. Asking nicely does not deter sharing. So we looked at do not track, passive privacy tools, and doesn't really do anything. There's no effect, except that there is an interesting effect. for a number of firms, websites, that when you ask politely, please do not track, they actually, and this is the orange bubbles, the orange bars, they actually track you more. So that's a little scary. That you say, well, is that just a few? No, remember these are the top 100. So in news, we had about 25% of the top 100 sites. When you say please do not track, they actually track you more.
Why do you think that is?
Because your information is valuable.
You think you're valuable anyway, right? So
Well,
they take your word for it.
It could be a psychometric behavioral trait that they're tagging into, someone who's paranoid or worried about their privacy. It could be some other reason. I don't know what the reasoning. We couldn't see what was being said. We just know who they were saying it with.
We can't do another poll question here, but if we did, I suspect only 5% of the audience would do not track. And you're saying they're probably right because it's ineffective anyway. But that 5% is probably pretty sophisticated, and maybe they are worth more. So maybe that's the underlying meaning of this.
It could be.
If you say you want your privacy, you're more valuable. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was going to say, and that's where things like regulations start to become really, really relevant. If you are asking, or if someone is proactively asking you to not track them, then how is it that this is your response to it?
So asking nicely doesn't work. That's
in this space.
In this space. So we had we created a model. So what we did in this study, this particular study, we did two things. We gathered empirical data that showed us what the reality was, but then we also created a mathematical economic model to describe what the this invisible hand of the market, how does the user privacy concerns actually impact the two competing firms, and what would the result be? The results of the model were consistent with what we saw in the marketplace. When you see it in the marketplace, you can't get inside the reasons, which is what the model is for. So one of the model results is that when user privacy concerns increase, both subscription fees and website prices you get for your data, it increases. And however, user traffic is affected. So website profit first goes up and then it goes down as privacy concerns go from low to high. So there's a sweet spot. What that's telling me is that the websites actually don't want people to be completely free of worry or completely paranoid. There's a sweet spot in the middle where they make the most money. And that's because you get this trade-off between subscription fees and monetization. So if we get, it's an interesting trade-off. And so first you're worse off, but then you begin to improve. But the third parties, however, their profits only decline as the privacy concerns rise. So one of the model results is that when one website privacy is unchanged, like they're not doing anything different, but the other website, their privacy is taking a hit or is improving, it actually makes the first website have to change their behavior. And then we showed how that changed their behavior, either to becoming better in terms of privacy toward the user or sharing more. And we looked at collusion, and websites are always better off, and then, no surprise, websites, users and third parties are always worse off. So what does the future hold?
Well, that would be my cue to try to tell you a little bit about what I think. One is that we're going to use more biometrics. And there's no question, because we're so bad. Passwords are definitely broken. We forget them. We write them down. We use similar passwords on different sites. And so biometrics is one possible solution. If you think about it, you can already enter and leave countries, open bank accounts, just using your face. It's also quite difficult to change our biometric data. There are behavioral biometrics. So for example, insurance companies, Progressive brought out the snapshot. So Flo said, put this thing under your dashboard and maybe you'll get a cheaper insurance. Well, Desjardins Insurance out of Montreal said, Why make them crawl under the dashboard? Everybody's carrying a dongle. They're carrying their phone. So they actually have a thing that allows you to track your driving, share it with them, and you might get a discount. Now, we did some research, and the average discount is in the like 8 to 12%. And I've decided with what my insurance costs, I'm not going to give up my privacy and tell them everywhere I go because they track every aspect, including if you're over the speed limit. But I was speaking to a bunch of students once, and the one student raised his hand and said, for 11% off my insurance, I would drive naked. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I had an at-fault accident. I'm a young man. My insurance is $14,000 a year. 11% of that is real money, right? So, it's a very subjective thing. Probably an interesting object lesson is what's going on in China because they are moving to a kind of social credit system, and part of it is based on facial recognition. So everybody in China is going to have a number, and you're going to be ranked from best person to worst person based on stuff like, do you pay your taxes on time? Do you jaywalk? That's a bad thing. Have you ever said hello to one of those protesters outside the embassy? Oh, that's a very bad thing. And all this is going to get combined, and I looked into what some of the restrictions are. If you have a low number, you're not allowed to fly in the airline. If you have a low number, certain hotels are not open to you. And their version of Tinder, the dating site, is going to display people based from most desirable to least desirable. So you're never going to get a date if you're down at the bottom.
But Tom, it's a little worse than that because the
what could be worse?
Well, your score also depends upon the behavior of the other people in your social network.
Yes.
So you could be doing nothing wrong, and other people in your social circle, maybe someone is upset with some sort of policy or something, and they start making
and you're linked to that person,
and you're linked to that
you can't
person.
break that link, right?
Right.
There's actually a payday lender in England called Lendo, and they set your interest rate based upon your contacts. You give them access to your Facebook, to your Instagram, everything like that, and they look. And if all your friends are homeless people, you're going to get a bad interest rate. But if you have reputable friends, preferably who have done business with Lendo and paid the loans back, you will get a preferential interest rate. But if you don't pay them, they reserve the right to shame you on Facebook, and you've given them access to it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You only want to do business with them if you're going to pay them back.
So Tom, I know you're going to get to it. Like, how do we stop all of this? But there is a question from an audience member saying, like, can we reset? We've come, I think, over the past 10 years, it would be fair to say that our concern for online privacy has just gone through the roof. So is there an opportunity to reset?
If you're under the age of 18 and live in California, yes. And I say that because they have a policy down there that you can actually get your social network scrubbed. And Facebook is obligated by law to do that. So there have been kids who have gone to them and said, I posted something when I was 15, I want that gone. In Europe, the new GDPR has the right to be forgotten. But in North America, no. And, I get called by lawyers, and they go, this kid, he's the next Sidney Crosby. He's great, but he put some unfortunate stuff up on Facebook that he now regrets. Can we hire you, Dr. Keenan, to clean his Facebook? I said, well, you can hire me, and I can tell Facebook, please take this down. But what if his worst competitor, his worst enemy, who's also the next Sidney Crosby, has copied all those bad pictures over onto his computer? I can't get access to that. So I once wrote a paper called On the Internet, Things Never Ever Completely Go Away, and that's probably the best motto. The answer is no, you can't reset, but you can start today to not give out any more information.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do that, then you lose the benefits.
You do.
Of, I like my smartwatch. It has a lot of nice features.
Right. I'm sure it doesn't. Do you wear it 24/7?
No, because the battery in this particular one doesn't work as well. But when I had a good battery, I did wear it 24/7.
Okay.
But the response from someone who's a little more concerned about giving up information related to their heart rate, related to how much they eat, how their weight is going up or down, their response will be quite different from yours. So I think it's down to how do you protect yourself based on
But these tools
the
can be
value that
quite
you
valuable.
do or don't get.
You can use these tools to lose a lot of weight. You mentioned weight loss. There's a lot of good side to
I'm not going to say the answer, but if your Fitbit sees that you just burned 150 calories and it's 2:30 a.m. and you took 0 steps, your Fitbit knows how you burn those calories, right?
So moving on, some of the top tips from you.
Yes. Okay. First of all, be info stingy. So when a website asks for your information, I used to work with Kathy McDowell, who was a police constable. We would tell kids, put down my name when it asks for your name, or put down IP freely or something like that. You're allowed to lie on the internet. And the kids would go, officer, I'm allowed to lie on the internet. Yes, you're allowed, not to the government, not to your bank, maybe not to your employer, but you can lie like a rug. When I do health surveys, I say I have diabetes, which I don't. Then I say it's gestational, which means I'm pregnant. And they throw the data out. So I get the benefits, but I tell lies all the time with good reason. Don't accept Facebook or LinkedIn requests from people you've never heard of. There's probably some bad person on the other side of the world who wants to know the structure of your company. So who has the ability to cut a check? Because they're going to then try to scam your company. Speak out in favor of online privacy. Every time you have a chance, whether you vote or whatever you're doing, think about people who are pro-privacy. And probably the most important thing, every time a new technology comes into your life, think about its privacy. I just put in a Ring doorbell, and I get little videos, 30-second video clips of everybody who rings my door. And it is so funny because I hear what they say when they're waiting for me to not answer the door. And sometimes it can be pretty funny.
So I would add one more item to the list. And for parents, if they're worried about their kids and the privacy, add an ad blocker to the computer. Ad blocker does it. So the one that I use, I'm not endorsing any particular one, but AdBlock Plus is fairly decent. It does have some relationships with large companies that create advertisements, but it's fairly good.
But now you're seeing some sites that say, please turn off your ad blocker. This is how we make our money.
Exactly. And then there's a choice that the individual has to make at that moment. So if you want to read that Forbes article, then you have to turn the ad blocker off for them, and then they.
And presumably you can turn it off for a while.
Yeah, you just click temporary disconnect. Yeah.
Yes.
But then they have your information, and the question is, are you really going to extract yourself from technology? I think it's almost impossible to remove yourself from the culture.
But it is possible to be aware of it. And when that ad for that watch pops up, you can think long and hard, not only, why is that ad and how did that ad come up, but do I want to be suckered into this? And I got to tell you one more thing. There is now technology to measure how long you look at a picture. So Twitter is using that. If you linger on somebody's Twitter post, they know how many seconds you watched it.
Yeah, there's all of this information available. I think there was one other point you made here, which was about watching your financial statements more carefully.
Well, definitely, because the bad guys want your money. That's one of the things. And for a long time, there were $9.90 charges on a lot of people's credit cards that they just ignored. And it was actually a scammer who had found a way to put a recurring charge on there. So question everything on your credit card.
Yeah. So we have tons of questions.
Good.
Many of them are quite similar. But there's a very interesting one here that says, are there legal ways to mask or hide your identity? So, clearly there's a lot going on, and how far should we really go?
So I have a chapter in technocreep called anti-creep, and obviously one of the things you can do is there are apps that you can use to make your phone number look different. I could make it look like I was calling from the White House. I know the phone number of the White House, and I can make that happen. What you need to know is that people therefore can impersonate your bank. So even if you know the number of your bank manager, they can make it look like that. And those technologies are legal. So I tell people that don't give out the information and fudge it a little bit. Like, don't put your real birth date on Facebook. I have so many different birth dates. I get a happy birthday from some company every week, right? Because they're all fake birth dates. My real one is private to me and the government. Yeah.
But you also, I was at a gas station in the middle of British Columbia, and I get a phone call on my cell phone from my bank. Now, I could call them back.
And you should.
So my wife called them back on her phone simultaneously as I called them, as I talked to them. And I was comfortable that it was the bank.
Yeah.
Because, we had two conversations going on simultaneously. And the callback is a pretty powerful anecdote to that.
That's the answer to all this Canada Revenue Agency. Like, if you don't pay us today, we're going to put you in jail. Well, call the CRA and see if they really are after you. The chances are they aren't.
Yeah, I mean, I got that call yesterday.
Everybody got
so.
that
You got it yesterday?
Yes.
You know, there's
sure not.
Yeah. Okay. Lots of scams out there.
So moving on to another question, which is, we talk a lot about cameras. Do we also have to be cautious about those cameras in public transport that might use information harvested other than for security purposes?
So I come down in favor of those, okay, because they're used for law enforcement. But there's a great privacy expert, former commissioner in Ontario, Ann Kabukian, and she makes a very good point. That footage needs to be thought about, and if there's no crime on the number 7 bus after 2 weeks, it should be deleted. Right? So where I worry is that when they retain that footage for indefinite periods of time, and maybe fishing expeditions happen, like, oh, well, when was Ray on that bus? And there have certainly been surveillance operations based on that. So I wouldn't worry about that as long as the agency running it has good policies.
And that's always something as a private citizen, you're always campaigning for that and asking what the policy
And there it's the most effective thing. If I can just quickly tell the story of the West Side Rec Center, which had a big controversy because they put a camera in the men's locker room. And it was because there were thefts where people were breaking into lockers, taking people's car keys, going to their house and robbing them, right? So they actually were cleaning out their house while they were using the swimming pool. So they put a camera in, and it went horribly wrong for all kinds of reasons. But what I said is there are other ways to do that. You could have put plainclothes police in the locker room to catch the bad guy. You could have, what the university did is they made us rent locks from them. And you can cut those locks, but you need a 48-inch bolt cutter. And if somebody comes into the men's locker room with a 48-inch bolt cutter, somebody's going to notice.
Yes.
You don't use that for exercise? A new
Well,
form
you know,
of,
you probably
isometric
put a
exercise
little
time.
band on the thing. So the point is that there are less privacy-invasive ways to solve a lot of problems.
So,
I happen to think the one on the bus is fine.
So back to the masking issue. It's very tough. Even if you use Tor, the onion ring, it's still not guaranteed.
So there's a question, or there's been a couple of questions about VPNs.
VPNs are good. I'm a big fan of VPNs, but there is no such thing as permanent privacy. So what you're doing is think of it as maybe a kid who lives in a dorm room. When I lived in dorm rooms at university, we took we still had typewriters back then, Tom, and we took our typewriters and we hid them in the closet. And it just made it a little harder for the casual thief to take the typewriter or whatever valuable it was that we had. Did it completely prevent someone from, if they were really intent?
It's about making it harder.
It's about making it harder.
Yes.
And VPNs or other forms of security just make it harder. But if the person, let's be paranoid, if the entity that's after you is has unlimited resources, let's say it's the Russians that are after you, I think they can figure out how to hack the VPN.
Where you definitely want a VPN is in a public place. So you're at the airport, you see free airport Wi-Fi. How do you know that's real? I know a guy who has these things he makes for $50 that fake a Wi-Fi. You can make it whatever you want. And he's put them in Starbucks, he's put them in gyms, and they go undetected from us. They just sit in the wall. And finally somebody notices, what's that thing plugged in over there? And they take it apart and they realize he was capturing all the non-VPN traffic. So the VPN at least gives you, as Ray said, some protection.
So in public places, you should be ideally be using one of those types of strategies.
Always.
Or if you want to watch US Netflix, I didn't say that, but that's what a lot of people use the VPN for, is to pretend they're in another country.
There's a profound question here asking, is privacy actually over? Is there no such thing as privacy?
Depends how we define it. Okay, so there are a lot of young people who go, I don't care. You can know everything about my life. Well, if I sat down with them for half an hour, I would, and they talk with me frankly, I will find something that they don't want other people to know. They don't want their grandmother to know. I think everybody has secrets, okay? And we're still going to want to preserve those. And that's where we get the tension, because, it's what's inside of our heads. And when there is evidence that to some extent the web knows what we want before we want it, that our brains actually are reacting to stimuli. And so an ad pops up, You may click buy on that $5,000 watch because, as Ray said, of the emotional state you're in. And what is really freaky is if that web camera's on, they can look at your face and decide you're in a really vulnerable position right now. You just lost your job and your spouse left. We're going to try to sell you something to make you feel good.
Right.
So I have a silly story. I don't know if we have time for this, but it's
We have
very
1
quick.
minute.
1 minute.
Mm.
Perfect. This is not a new issue. In the 1800s, there was a big debate when cameras first emerged. And the question was, is it ethical? It's such an invasion of privacy to take a picture of people on the street.
Yep.
Because now it will always be known that I was walking on that street at that time, and I didn't, that was viewed as a terrible invasion of privacy. We're past that.
In a public place.
Yeah.
Not through your windows. That's called voyeurism.
And it's related to the security, right? The level of security that we are seeing around the world. So, like I said, we are very close to our closing time, so I'm going to move on. Thank you so much. Like, clearly there's a lot we need to think about.
Where did the time go?
Where did the time go? It's all about what is the value exchange, but overall, like from whatever you were saying, it's all back to the basics. It's common sense, and whatever you would do to keep yourself safe offline, you apply a lot of judgment when you are out and about. Apply the similar type of judgment when you are in the digital space. Thank you to our speakers for sharing the great information with us and having a pretty robust conversation. Our slide and our recordings will follow. There is a survey, like I said before. If you haven't filled it out already, please fill it out now. You can also sign up for our upcoming webinars as well as some of our previous webinars through our website. Please go to ucalgary.ca/explore and you will find a lot of information there. We have webinars, we have ebooks, we have articles, a whole bunch of different assets that you might find interesting. Lastly, please email us any ideas that you may have for other upcoming webinars. We would love to hear from you, whether it's about a webinar or any other topic that you'd like us to explore. So with that, thank you once again, and thank you to our audiences from the University of Calgary.